Again, we just mentioned markets coming off record highs. Now they're pulling back a bit. What do you think this is? I mean, we've been talking about the Trump trade. Is this a sign it might be cooling off in your mind?
Well, that's yet to be determined, but we do have optimism that's very, very high. And I think that that's going to be the key going forward. How sustainable is optimism, especially given the possibility of a turbocharge of the U.S. economy, which should fuel optimism, Frank, but then at the same time could very well potentially take the deficit much higher, which is what I think a lot of us are concerned about.
Yeah, a couple things to weigh there. Again, coming off record highs, but futures are pulling back just a bit. With that in mind, what's your word of the day?
Optimism. I think that's what it's all about. We have small business optimism coming out this morning, and I think that's going to be clutch going forward. Everyone is expecting a turbocharge of the U.S. economy with a Republican sweep, which sounds great, but it really depends on what happens with the fiscal deficit and a reignition of inflation, Frank. So I don't think that the Fed is going to be able to cut as aggressively or even nearly as much as the markets are currently pricing in, and I think that's going to potentially weigh on sentiment. The big issue, I think, Frank, is going to be how much deficit reduction can be done if corporate taxes and individual taxes are going to be reduced so dramatically.
All right, so you're kind of giving us two sides. You're saying how long can hope last? At the same time, you're optimistic. Very quickly, I do want to touch on something I think a lot of people are trying to be optimistic about, the bond market. In fact, David Zervos came out with a note talking about bond yields actually cooling on the thought that President-elect Trump can cut spending. So when you're looking at bonds, how optimistic are you that yields will stay lower and not be an impediment to equities?
Yeah, to be clear, I think that the scenario is very positive if, in fact, there is a form of deficit reduction to the tune of even close to the 30% that the administration is talking about with Elon Musk. But look, I think that you want to be in steepeners right now. I think that there's a very good chance that the term premium, which is, of course, the back end of the Treasury yield, is going to move higher. So I do prefer the shorter end of the curve. I think high yield probably is a good place to be at the moment.
All right, so Kathryn, almost out of time, but what is your pick for us today and why?
Yeah, look, I think that industrials and defense are going to be the sectors that continue to move higher, as well as banks, especially if we get a steepening of the curve. So I think those are the traditional Trump trades, and I think they have further to go. All
right, there we go. Among them, would you play it when you look in defense? Would you play the ETF, one of these ETFs, the ITA, or would it be an individual stock? And you got to keep it at just stock or ETF. Which way?
Oh, I definitely think the index, which you can play via ETF.